Does the wage gap exist exclusively because of sexism? Are men and women paid different wages on average because of gender exclusively? These are two questions I've had for years, and it was only after doing some research that I realized there's a lot more to the wage gap than meets the eye. So today we're going to talk about that, understanding the wage gap a little bit more. We're going to do that through talking a little bit about the history of America's wage gap, the major contributing factors to the wage gap, and then I want to finish up by talking about one of women's untold wins when it comes to the workforce. Now, to talk about this, we have to discuss what is a wage gap. A wage gap is the difference in rate of pay between two different groups of people. So by definition, absolutely. There are quite a few wage gaps when it comes to America. With that being said, though, what we're kind of trying to pinpoint today is the main contributing factor or exclusive contributing factor to the wage gap sexism. Well, to talk about that, we have to talk about a piece of legislation that has worked really hard to make it illegal for there to be a sexism-based wage gap, and that was the Equal Pay Act, which came out in 1963. Now, the Equal Pay Act made it illegal to discriminate based on sex. Now, that doesn't mean that it never happens. However, it means that there can't necessarily be a wage gap that exists exclusively because of sexism. So if it doesn't exist exclusively because of sexism, what are the contributing factors that make up the wage gap? 5 major contributing factors to the wage gap is choice of career, education, time off to raise children, performance, and work experience. And the first one I want to talk about is basically just experience of time. And I want to start by talking about a quote from Carrie Lucas, who says, "The Department of Labor's Time U.S. survey shows that full-time working women spend on average 8.01 hours per day on the job, compared to 8.7 hours for full-time working men. One would expect that someone who works 9% more would also earn more. This one fact alone accounts for more than a third of the wage gap." The next one I want to focus in on is overall experience. Author Yasmin Basen-Cassino says, "Studies have shown that years of experience on the job accounts for a substantial portion of the gender wage gap. Due to women's traditional domestic duties, such as child rearing and housekeeping, the average woman on the labor market has fewer years of experience than the average man." And then another major contributing factor being the types of jobs women work. Women also tend to dominate jobs that offer lower yearly wages, such as nurse and teacher positions, and this is typically perceived as a major negative effect. However, it's important to remember these positions have stood the test of time and have remained almost completely unaffected by recessions. And that brings me to one of my final points I want to talk about. A major win for women in the workforce is that our jobs have often stood the test of time and kept us from ever surpassing the unemployment rate for men. Historically, the rate of unemployment for women has almost always been less than the unemployment rate for men. The unemployment rate is lower for women because men's careers tend to be more affected by recessions due to working in fields directly connected by the economy, such as manufacturing and construction. Though the majority of jobs held by women earn lower yearly wages, their positions have stood the test of time and have remained almost completely unaffected through the years. So, does the wage gap exist exclusively because sexism? It doesn't. This is something that brought peace to me through my research. There are a lot of contributing factors to the wage gap, such as the ones mentioned earlier. Some things like education and time off to raise children, and performance and work experience, and just what career you pick in the first place. And it was good for me to know that despite historically working lower wage jobs and despite all of the wage gap issues faced for years and years, women are employed more consistently, historically, than men. So what I hope you walk away with today is knowing that women don't enter into the workforce with an X on their back. A lot of the factors in the wage gap are simply from choice. And that brought a lot of peace to me. Thank you.